The Boys is finally back with season 4, and after season 4, we've got one more season left, as it was announced earlier this week that the show is going to finish its run with season 5, which I think is pretty good if you ask me, and I'll get round to talking about that later on in the video. Now, if you haven't seen these episodes, I'm going to get into some spoiler stuff, but first, before getting into that, I want to talk about the show itself. So we have to wait years for a time for shows like this and House of the Dragon to come back, and after they are, we both get, well, both of them this week. So you can see with this quality level of shows that are going on with television at the moment, why the box office is slowly dying, and why it's going the way that it's going. Let's get to it first. This is a show that takes aim and isn't afraid to fire, and season 4 is making it pretty clear who it's aiming for and what it's trying to say. The first 3 episodes have a lot of commentary on political issues in society today, especially America, stuff like fake news, conspiracy theories, and what goes on around how things are covered up in the news, and the general overall message and perception of events and things that are happening and how that can get out of hand and lead to, situations being manipulated. And with a longer first episode, it really sets up the direction that they're going to take in this season.
Like Caesar.
Like Caesar.
If you've read the comics, you know what Dakota Bob and Newman's presidential run means, but they're not in a rush to really get there. Tonally, this is the darkest season of The Boys yet, and we're only 3 episodes in. And it really feels like this season is going to be a ride, and it's not all doom and gloom as we get all the storylines from the last season picked up and introduced to some new characters as well as a new Black Noir, but I'm going to get to that.
Doing too much. Pull it back.
But as always, here's the intro before we get into the episode. Thanks for taking the time to choose to watch this video, I really appreciate it, and if you want to support the channel, make sure you subscribe and leave a like as well. And as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, so let's get into The Boys Season 4, Episodes 1 to 3. So it opens up with God Save the Queen playing and Victoria Newman on stage as Dakota Bob Singer's vice presidential running mate. Because remember, at the end of season 3, Homelander sent the Deep to kill the guy that was going to run for vice president alongside Dakota Bob. So this elevated Newman into a position of power, and man, is Dakota Bob nervous about that, but I'm going.
After that, a Supe is one heartbeat away from the presidency. My fucking heartbeat!
He wins the election, and it kind of looks like he is from this opening scene. She's going to be one step away from being the President of America. And again, if you've read the comics, you know all roads lead to the big finale in the White House. It's just us catching up to get there. But the boys are also at this event there with Starlight, aka Annie, who's now part of the team, having left Vought in the 7, and her Starlight identity behind last season. But for the purposes of the video, I'm still going to call her Starlight, so get used to it because it doesn't really fly. Annie does it. Do you get it? Do you get it? Anyway. Butcher's still feeling the effects of Temp V and is now regulated to be on the lookout for the boys, not because of his health but because of his actions, and we find out later on the power dynamic in the team has changed. But they've got a job to do, and that job is taking down Newman. Homelander and Ryan are there as well, and you can see that spending time with his son, his teachings have really, rubbed off on him.
Toys for our amusement, that's right.
He's on trial for murder for the end of season 3, and Newman views him as having a bit of a toxic image after the whole public murder on television, which is dividing America a lot, as you can imagine. And did they really explore that this season? But I'll get into that later on. Butcher and Ryan reconnect, and you can tell how Ryan's time with Homelander has really changed him. He's not the shy, innocent kid anymore, he's beginning to question things, and before Butcher can really get to him, Homelander interrupts and reveals Butcher's condition to Ryan. And Homelander doesn't really see Butcher as a threat anymore, as a man or a father. He thinks he's won after Ryan chose him at the end of season 3. But as I said, the boys aren't there for Homelander, they're after Victoria Newman. And they're trying to poison her because you can't really take out a head popper at range or face to face. And Frenchie and Kimiko are in the middle of this mission when her daughter Zoe walks in. And remember, she's been given V2 and we finally get to see her power, which isn't great but is pretty terrifying. French and Kimiko barely escape before being saved by a now flying Starlight, who's still trying to master the new ability and doesn't manage to get hold of Kimiko, forcing her to eat the pavement, but does manage to grab Frenchie. But as you remember, Kimiko's immortal, so, you know, gore, and what a great opening scene for the 4th season of The Boys. Newman finds Hughie and he's got a real regret here about the time that he wasted on her in the Department of Superhero Affairs. And you can tell that she does miss working with him and has regrets of her own. But she's on the up and up and her power is still a secret, so she proposes a standoff between herself and the boys as neither can really go after the other one at this point. And we find out that she's bulletproof and nearly invincible as well. So the fact that they can't go face to face for giving her abilities, the fact that she's invincible makes it even harder to come up with a way to get to her. It's also bad news for Dakota Bob, who's working with the CIA and the boys and was behind this entire mission to try and take out Newman, because, as I've said, he doesn't want a Supe one step away from running America. And as I said, there's a bit of a power dynamic in the change of leadership in the team, with Mother's Milk now running the show and Butcher being demoted for letting Ryan go at the end of season 3. At a CIA debriefing after the mission, we meet Kessler, who's an old associate of Billy's who's also been working in the superhero field as well. But the boys are all about the superheroes, so catching up with the 7. Even though he died last season, Black Noir is back in the team, and I'm going to get to that, but there's still a few members short, with Maeve and Starlight leaving the 7 last season, and they're on the hunt for the best and the brightest. And one new superhero being introduced is the smartest woman alive, aka Sister Sage. Homelander is still running Vought by fear and other methods as well. But he does want Sister Sage on his side and goes undercover to meet her, and turns out that Homelander is having a bit of a midlife crisis himself. And I love the outfit, it always looks like the sort of undercover stuff Marvel do with Captain America and Ant-Man, and it's been done 1,000 times before, and I think it's also the only time we've seen Homelander out of the outfit in the 4 seasons, but if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. So anyway, he goes to meet Sister Sage because of his midlife crisis. He's getting older and age is the one thing that he can't beat with his superpowers. And he's also worried that he's past his prime. He's got everything that he wanted and it still hasn't fulfilled him. So he wants Sage's advice on how to build the world that he ideally could do, and she lays it out for him and he offers her a place on the 7 as his advisor in this new world that he wants to build. Starlight and Mother's Milk want Butcher out of the boys. He's broken, he's dying, and he's unreliable, and he still wants to keep his promise to his wife to try and save Ryan. So he goes to the only place that he's got left and tries to make a deal with Victoria Newman, and we get quite a few Gen V references here as well, with them meeting in the same arcade, and the whole virus at God U being brought up, which apparently still isn't strong enough to bring down Homelander. Her being a politician, of course she wants to make a deal and she wants the dirt that the boys have on her background. Butcher only wants Ryan back, safe, and if you ask me, Victoria Newman is an idiot for agreeing to this. It means that she's got to try and get Ryan away from Homelander, and that's going to be a lot harder than the boys just handing over some documents about her past. One character that we haven't seen in a while is Hughie's dad, and he's brought back in this season after suffering a stroke. So with Butcher also having a brain injury, both his father figures aren't in a great state. Butcher's faced death before, but on his terms, and he's got no control over how or when he'll die this time. So Sage agrees to Homelander's plan and sets up a meeting with some of his more hardcore followers, including Todd, who I mentioned earlier on, who's Mother's Milk's ex-wife, ex-boyfriend. But there's a twist. Homelander wants Noir deep in A-Train to kill them as a sort of loyalty test, and man, it's extreme as you think.
Yo, what the fuck? That was so fucked up, you guys.
And the new Noir talks, and stick about because yeah, he talks, folks, and I'm going to get to that.
Oh shit! Sorry, you guys, I'm narcoleptic.
One of the main focuses of episode 1 is the trial of Homelander coming to an end, and Sister Sage decides to go to one of the demonstrations outside of the courtroom, undercover on the opposite side, just as a not guilty verdict is announced, and she starts a fight which turns into a riot as Homelander watches on. And yeah, this season is going balls to the wall with the US politics stuff. I mean, that's straight out of the whole January 6th nutbook conspiracy thing, and let's not think about that too much. Starlight, as I said, I'm just going to keep calling her that, arrives to stop it, saving a woman who works at the Starlight Foundation. But the really big twist here is A-Train drops the dead bodies of Todd and the others, framing the Starlight fans for the murder of 3 Homelander fans. And wow, this show is going deep. Like, man, did you see that coming? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. So Sister Sage has been in about 5 minutes of the show and she's changed the landscape already. I mean, how do you stop someone who can literally outthink you? And you think this was enough of a bombshell ending, but it's not. We get one final thing in episode 1, which is Hughie's mother showing up. So I wonder where they're going with this, but anyway, let's get into episode 2. It opens with the A-Train story, the latest instalment in the Vought cinematic universe, living, well, his sort of best life in a Wire type situation when his running coach, who's played by Will Ferrell, shows up, and it's Coach Brink, so I guess this is him supposed to be the same character from the Gen V show. And like most Vought stories in real-life Hollywood biopics, it gets a bit creative with the truth. Seriously guys, look up anything about Oppenheimer and the guys that died during the atomic bomb experiments. Not just Oppenheimer himself, it's pretty fascinating. Google it. Another weird reunion is Hughie and his mother, who he hasn't seen in decades, and it turns out that she works for Vought. She's got the power of attorney over his dad, so Hughie doesn't really like this, the fact that he's got no say in what's going to happen. And this isn't the only medical issue that Hughie's got to deal with. Butcher reveals his condition to the others and Mother's Milk instantly bounces him from the team, given that Butcher, having nothing to lose, is far too dangerous and unable to control. He's trying to piece together how the murders happened from the first episode and how the bodies were planted at the riot and who kills them. Mother's Milk realises that Sage is behind the Seven's new tactics and they start to investigate her as they get ready for their mission. Ryan is getting ready for his as well, and it's all set up as you'd think, with stuntmen, marks and choreography. Showing how, like the riot at the end of the first episode, things can be staged and aren't really as they seem, and we find out later on this is true with one of the Vought superheroes when we discover that A-Train's saves were all staged, and he's even less of a superhero than we already knew.
That was a soundstage in the Bronx. That terrorist? That was a stunt, man.
And how things are manipulated and comes across as another big part in this episode, as it takes the boys to a conspiracy theory gathering when they follow Sister Sage and end up finding Butcher waiting on them. Sage is there to stir the pot because, let's be honest, it's going to be pretty easy for her. She's interested in a supe called Firecracker who's very anti-Starlight and gives a presentation on all the threats America faces and knows who her audience is and who she's after. Internet, get a grip of yourself. Why do some people believe this stuff? Or maybe it is all real and the secret media that controls everything is paying me to throw you off the scent? Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Sage tries to recruit Firecracker for the Seven, and it's clear how she'd use someone like this and their followers to get what she wants. With the world, and by the world I mean America, I mean America when I say that, come on guys. Anyway, with the world needing a symbol, Hughie wants Annie to become Starlight again, but she sees that as a name that Vought used like a product, and doesn't want to go back to using that even if it's for a good cause or in order to do something that she knows is right. So A-Train decides to step up and gives the boys the evidence proving that the murderers, or at least the accused murderers at the riot, were innocent. Ryan's first save is live streamed for the world, but Homelander shows up to steal his big day and change the narrative, with Ryan killing the stuntman who trained him, and you get the message about changing the narrative here, don't you? I mean, come on guys. Conspiracy convention, Sage manages to capture Mother's Milk, Frenchie and Kimiko, and wants Firecracker to kill them as proof of her loyalty. So is Sister Sage also the world's biggest psychopath as well? I mean, come on man. Anyway, they manage to escape fighting a superhero called Splinter who can duplicate himself, and if you've seen the episode, you know I can't show you any of the fight, because man, there's a lot of nudity and a lot of gore in these first 3 episodes of The Boys. Going to have to leave blank or blur out here, but if you've seen the episode, let me know what you thought of it below. They decide to give Frenchie a new love interest this season with Colin, who's someone who works at the Starlight Foundation, and he's got links to Frenchie's past because Frenchie killed his entire family. His dad was a senator, and for some reason, little Nina sent Frenchie on a mission to get rid of them. It certainly provides a reason and explanation as to why Colin got into drugs, and this is where he met Frenchie at one of these sort of alcoholic or narcotic anonymous meetings. And episode 2 ends with Mother's Milk and Butcher trying to put their differences aside, and I love, if you look at the office behind Mother's Milk, all the post-it notes are perfectly straight because he's got OCD. Butcher wants to spend his remaining time trying to save Ryan, and he needs the boys' help to do so. And after all these years and all his bullshit, Mother's Milk is done, and he turns him away, turning his back on the boys and everyone else, so Butcher is literally on his own at this point. And that's pretty much where episode 2 ends off. Episode 3 opens with Homelander addressing his base and introducing the 2 new members of the Seven, Sage and Firecracker. Homelander, like a lot of other people, isn't convinced about Firecracker and is questioning Sage's advice because they've got a totally different way of doing things, and basically Homelander isn't smart enough to understand what she's trying to do with the Seven and himself. But he isn't the only one confused. Mother's Milk doesn't understand the new choices for the Seven either, and he wants to try and turn A-Train, making him an informant for the boys, but given his history with Hughie and Starlight, they aren't exactly loving that idea. Well, Frenchie and Kimiko decide to go off on their own vengeance mission against the Shining Star terrorist organisation from season 1 that gave Kimiko her powers. This was a bit of a callback I didn't expect, and I said earlier on I wasn't sure what they were doing with Frenchie this season. I'm also not sure what they're doing with Kimiko, but I'll talk about that in a bit. With not being on the boys anymore, Butcher's gone back to Joe Kessler for help to try and get Ryan. But he's worried that Kessler might have plans for his own if he manages to get his way with Ryan, because he could be the strongest superhero in the world in a few years' time, and, let's be honest, the most powerful weapon. The new Noir is struggling to fit in with the Seven, and we still don't really know who this guy is, other than he's an actor that they've recruited.
Oh shit!
Sorry, you guys, I'm narcoleptic.
You didn't hire me to stand around like a fucking oak tree.
What do you need?
Some direction.
How they found him really is another question as well, and we don't even know if he does actually have any superpowers. Sage is trying to work out who gave Starlight the evidence to clear up the rioters and is now effectively running the show at Vought. She doesn't name any suspects or even really look at A-Train, but she can feed him false information that will then get fed to the boys, and she can use that to manipulate the situation the way that she wants. You know, get them to kill someone who's innocent or do something in public, that sort of thing. She's really smart enough to play the long game, and I think that's why she doesn't make any moves or suspicions of A-Train in this scene. But Butcher is still trying to reconnect with Ryan and convinces him to meet up, trying to remind him of who he was before he left with Homelander. And he's also there to try and drug and kidnap him as well, because it's Billy Butcher after all. But they manage to connect again with Ryan telling him about his first event being staged, and Butcher clearly knowing that that was the case anyway, and this is all a sort of set-up to try and force Ryan to see what his dad's doing to him. He thinks he can try and talk Ryan round rather than use force, but Joe Kessler isn't so sure. He wants Ryan for the coming war against the Supes, and he lays it out pretty clearly for Butcher that it's recruit Ryan or kill him in the long run. Starlight manages to visit Firecracker, and it turns out the two have a past, both being part of the teenage superhero beauty pageant circuit. And we've seen flashbacks of this before in the show, and it wasn't a time that Annie or Starlight enjoyed in her life. And let's just say Starlight Regina Georged Firecracker's ass back in the day, and now she wants to settle the score. So this is the reason that Sage picked Firecracker to join the Seven. She wants to destroy Starlight more than anything and won't stop till it happens. But the boys are still on the case, and on a tip from A-Train, Hughie and Mother's Milk go to Vought on Ice to try and spy on Newman as she meets Sage and Homelander. And Sage lays out the plan for this new world with more superhero control and less oversight, literally ruling America and the world, and eventually ending up with Victoria Newman herself coming out as a Supe president. Homelander realises that they're being watched and goes on a mini rampage through Vought on Ice trying to catch Hughie, and the ice rink stuff is straight out of a horror movie, but again, I can't show you that, but man. Hughie finally asks his mother why she left him and how she could do it, and she tells him she had to leave as her life or the weight of it at the time was crushing her. Now, the most shocking twist in the first 3 episodes is the fact that the smartest woman on the planet decides to sleep with the dumbest man in the world. And yeah, I wonder if this is a manipulation or Sister Sage was just using Deep for a bit of a one-nighter. She does seem to think long-term, and the Deep isn't exactly going to be the hardest guy on the planet to manipulate, so I wonder where they're going with this. Also going on at the tower, Homelander is pissed about Ryan's visit to Butcher because he's so insecure he can't handle any competition from Butcher or even Ryan himself. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, Homelander is getting older and he's more aware that Ryan's going to take his place one day, and it's literally a ticking clock situation. He starts to hallucinate, talking to himself again in the shattered mirror, which is clearly supposed to represent his fractured psyche. By the way, seeing all the conflicted aspects of Homelander's personality play out was absolutely fantastic. But they all tell him to go home, and remember, Homelander was created and raised in a lab, so I guess we're finally going to see where he spent his youth. And that's pretty much the first 3 episodes of The Boys Season 4. And that's a lot right there, even more than I can show on YouTube without getting demonetized. In the first 3 episodes, we get a lot of politics, but what I noticed this show is doing is focusing a lot, and I mean a lot, on the past of these characters in these first 3 episodes. We get Hughie's mum showing up and him dealing with it, we get Frenchie dealing with his past actions with Colin, and we've got Kimiko going back to where she literally started in the story, as well as Starlight and the whole Firecracker thing. Which, by the way, them facing off was my favourite scene in all these episodes. Starlight has always been America's good girl, but we learned she wasn't always that way, being a bit of a bitch when she was a kid. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about how deep or how often this show is taking its characters into the past at the moment and what the payoff's going to be. But one thing that I absolutely loved and was the total highlight of the first 3 episodes was Sister Sage and Firecracker as the new superheroes this season. Sister Sage, for me, is the more interesting one because, again, she's the smartest woman on the planet, so why is she helping Homelander? She knows long term that he's going to get bored of her or she's going to say something and piss him off, and that's going to be the end of her anyway, so I wonder how she's going to think her way out of or around that. Also, how the boy's going to beat her, she's going to see them coming a mile away, so I wonder where they're going to take this. But yeah, what do you guys think about Sister Sage and Firecracker, and how would you beat them? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to do a separate video on Sister Sage as well, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And another new character this season was Joe Kessler, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and we've seen from the trailer this is the guy that's developing the anti-superhero virus, and going back to the comics, this is a big part of the finale, especially for Butcher and Hughie and how their relationship plays out. I said at the start of the video, we know when The Boys is ending and it's going to be next season with Season 5, and so far Season 4 is really setting that up with the whole Dakota Bob election and the Newman stuff. But I liked Joe Kessler as well. He seems like a much darker version of Butcher, wanting to recruit or kill Ryan, and he doesn't even try and hide the fact to Billy because he doesn't care how he's going to react. And I guess they brought Joe Kessler in because they didn't want to make Butcher too much of a villain, so I wonder how that one is going to play out as well. But my god, is this show dark, or I should say this first 3 episodes. Way darker than anything that we've got in the previous season of The Boys, and the comedy is also a little bit less, or at least used in a different way, mainly with characters like Black Noir and the Deep taking the sort of brunt of the comedy in these first 3 episodes. Which I have to say I enjoyed, I just didn't expect it was going to get that dark that quickly. But as I mentioned earlier on, they are going into these characters' pasts, and one of the ones that I worry about is Hughie's mum. Why is she showing up now, and is what she told him true about her past? Because when I found out that she worked for Vought, the first thing that I thought of is, well, maybe they wanted to give him compound V as a kid, and the argument between his mum and dad was the thing that caused the fracture in the marriage. I don't know, that could happen. But I think it's a little bit late in the game for this, especially as they didn't focus on it in the early 3 seasons. The same with Kimiko as well, bringing back the whole Shining Star stuff from Season 1 in her past. I don't know how they're going to play this out over the rest of the season, but they also seem to be setting up her future with her trying to get therapy and, you know, establish a bit more of herself, I guess. And I did feel the same about the whole Frenchie romance thing as well. I wasn't sure where it was going initially until we found out about his links to Colin's family in his past, but I do like it. I just think it's a little bit late in the game to be bringing up this character's past. But Kimiko is the one that I'm not really sure where they're going to go with, because she's got way more development in the show as a character than she ever did in the source material. But I don't know how I feel about what they're doing with her here, because so far, because as always, so let's get to the politics of it all, and I'm not taking one side or the other, but you can hash that out in the comments if you want. Man, it's hard hitting, but we're used to that with a show, and we're getting a mirror here, and I do mean a mirror for what's going on in our own society. And it's all done well, really well, in fact so well it's hard to watch. People like watching TV shows like this for escapism, and seeing it hit so close to home on these levels doesn't really give me any faith in humanity. I don't know what you guys think about that. But that's what this show does, because it's not a superhero show, it's a satire on the world itself and ultimately us. And seeing how we're reflected and how actions play out in our world in this show is very tough to watch. And it does make you realise there are quite a lot of people with questionable views, questionable morals, and are willing to exploit, let's just say, less intelligent people in order for fame and fortune. And yeah, it happens every day and it pisses me off as well. But let me know what you think about the politics. I don't want to get into it too much. One thing that I didn't really talk about as well is Butcher's hallucinations of his ex-wife Becca. I think this is just a sort of side effect of his brain condition. I don't think it actually means anything, because they've kind of isolated Butcher so far for the start of this season, and I guess it's just to give him a sounding board, like he used to have with Hughie, but you know, they're not spending that much screen time together. I thought they were going to make Butcher the big villain of this season, but it seems they're going to focus that more on Joe Kessler in the long run. And as I said, I think the major arc of this season, if you take out all the politics and social commentary, is the battle for Ryan's soul and how that's all going to play out. Ryan isn't in the comics, so they could do anything with him, and it does make it quite hard to predict, and I guess a little fun. Because whichever side this kid chooses, the other one is ultimately going to lose. Maybe not there and then, but certainly further down the road. But those are just my thoughts and some of my feelings on the first 3 episodes of The Boys Season 4. As always, I want to know what you guys think, so let me know in the comments below. I'm going to be doing a lot more Boys videos. As I said, I've got a Sister Sage one coming, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And if you've made it this far, as always, leave a like on the video and feel free to follow me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. My name's Al, thanks for watching.